Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, episode 545, For the Good of All. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Today, I will continue with imagination and innovation. Here, I look at the role imagination plays in innovation and also ways to improve innovation. Right now I got Squeaks with me, my cat, but another cat, Whimsy, is nearby, perhaps ringing her bell and clawing. And now Squeaks is gone. But both cats are nearby, and in fact are playing a little bit. Cat noise may continue, but hopefully they'll settle down soon. Later on in the program, it's for the good of all. Here I look at ways government can improve society and help us all live better lives. Today's show will feature background footage from Pink Beds Trail. This is located in Pisgah National Forest. To get there from Hendersonville, North Carolina, take US 64 West. Eventually, that turns into US 276. Follow the road heading towards Waynesville. You'll enter Pisgah National Forest. After 5 or so miles, you'll come across Looking Glass Falls on the right. These are beautiful water. This is a beautiful waterfall, a worthy stop. You could even swim in the water at the base of the falls. But continue on to get to Pink Beds. So you keep heading towards Waynesville, maybe another 5 or so miles. You'll come to the Cradle of Forestry on the right. Pink Beds is just past that on the right. It's a picnic area, but there's a nice loop trail that goes through it, through the forest. However, there were a few mosquitoes, and so mosquito repellent was used. So, now let's continue on with imagination and innovation. Often there could be a good understanding, and it all starts from the proper empathy. However, it doesn't always work out, and it could backfire, and autistic people might have less empathy than normal people in certain situations. Other situations they might have more. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and I guess perhaps a little unpredictable. Obviously, each autistic individual is different, so talk to him or her and figure out the specifics of this. Why? Well, with an autistic person with good empathy on the situation you want to be innovative with, they might be able to help you be innovative. Their empathy might help provide further understanding of the situation and perhaps critical understanding of certain situations which you might not always think about, or you might play down their importance. Where the autistic individual with good empathy of this situation or person might be able to figure it out better because they could envision it better. they almost could become it, experience it in their imagination. Sure, at least I can, and I'm assuming this is a common phenomenon with autistic individuals. Anyway, so, moving along. We have to be innovative. So that means we gotta really be good with math and things like that. Well, we should have a calculator. But what happens if it dies or gets broken? In the distant past, like 100 years ago, they used a slide rule calculator. My dad had one. He showed me how to use it, but I didn't quite get it, only a vague understanding. But perhaps it might be good to learn how to use one, in case there's no calculators, or the calculators don't have power, or whatever. But it could get far worse. In the future, we might become increasingly dependent on artificial intelligence. We might use it in many aspects of our lives and become heavily reliant on it. Well, that's all good and dandy. We might be able to use this artificial intelligence to help us be innovative. Sure, and to help us come up with a creative solution to whatever problems we might face. Well, perhaps we need to jump into that and start thinking ahead to when disaster might strike. Perhaps asking artificial intelligence how to deal with flood control, for example, or extreme drought. Or asking artificial intelligence how to find water where there is no water. Perhaps getting water out of the air from the fog or the dew. Or perhaps finding water in other ways. I guess there always might be a spring, but once again, we need to know what to do. Water is critical, so we really need to figure that one out. How to get water when there is no water. As I said, we might be able to get it from the air with the proper setup and provided there's enough moisture in the air. But anyway, so we could get AI to assist us in our innovation, to help us find solutions to potential problems which might crop up in the future. However, one of these big reasons I'm pushing for be innovative, get creative, get ready for disaster. Well, there's a couple of reasons I'm sounding the alarm, so to speak. One is we are kind of under adverse conditions here in 2026, in June 2026, with the war with Iran, rising oil prices, and President Trump becoming more and more like a dictator. It could get worse in the future. So we got to be ready for potential disasters. But the other reason is, I was talking about before, using artificial intelligence to help you find solutions to things. Well, sure, that's all great. And as I said, I encourage you to do it, perhaps sooner than later. Because later, that might be one of the things that becomes unavailable. When we need artificial intelligence the most to help us out of a disaster, that's when it's most likely to be unavailable. So we need to function without artificial intelligence. We need our own intelligence. We need to be able to think for ourselves. We need to be smart. We need to learn more. We need to do more research. Research is critical. Knowledge is critical. That's what helps us be innovative. We need to have the background knowledge in physics, science, math, and other fields. Perhaps behavioral science and the way society is influenced by things, and perhaps other fields of knowledge. Well, I guess there's always medical knowledge, which could be critical. But we need to do our research. We need to be creative with our research. And we need to have people around us who specialize in various fields that we could call upon for their help. And I guess they could call upon us for our field that we specialize in. So I guess I'm saying you should specialize in something. Well, I guess that makes sense in general, just to find a decent job, but also could really help in a disaster situation where innovation might be critical. So we have to be creative. Also, well, in regular terms, innovation, and knowledge could really help with income and generating a good income stream. Also, all of this could be very useful to society. I guess the more useful, the more of an income stream. Or at least, hopefully so. Perhaps not always. But anyway, we need to be innovative. We need to find something that could really benefit society and benefit ourselves. And perhaps we can make money with all of this. But in the meantime, we just need to be more independent, be able to function on our own without the help of others or technology like artificial intelligence. We need to function well, mentally and physically. Sure, so I guess we gotta get in shape. We gotta hit the trail, like I was describing, the long hike up the side of the mountain. Or perhaps going to the gym or other activities. So we need to be in good shape, mentally, physically. We need to be ready. We need imagination and innovation. Now, it is time for the good of all. So, for the good of all, well, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm basically talking about how the government, I guess the state and federal government mostly, I guess the emphasis is mostly on the federal government, but the state and local governments have a role here too, in improving our lives, making things better for all of us. Sure, it sounds easy and noble. Is it achievable? Well, in the way I'm describing, perhaps it may be difficult. And I'm going to get into that right off the bat, so you know exactly what we're up against. Here we go. We're talking about an economic policy that is fair to all of us. Sure, doesn't that sound basic? Doesn't it sound obvious and the way it should be? but it's not really. Actually, a lot of government and economic policies are set up to benefit the wealthy, and particularly the ultra wealthy. The few people with large amounts of money. Where the people who are suffering, particularly the poor, and people such as minorities, young people, old people, people who might have disabilities, or who might have poor education, they need to be taken care of too. Their lives should not be marginalized. But often that's exactly the case, as often there is insufficient government benefits and a lot of suffering. Can this be changed? Perhaps so. Is it easy? Probably not. Can it be done? Probably so. Anyway, a good person to talk about this would probably be Robert Reich. I think he was head of the Department of Labor or something like that under Bill Clinton. And people like them, or people like him. Kind of liberal thinking economics. People like Bernie Sanders. People who could crunch the numbers and give you an answer mathematically and tell you if could work out, if the math makes sense, if the money's really there, and how much tax would be required to really make things better for all of us. Probably a little easier than we think. But why doesn't it happen? Well, certainly there is strong resistance. That's why, from the wealthy, powerful elite. So, what am I getting at here anyway? Well, I'm talking about the trickle-up theory. You hear about the trickle-down theory, that somehow when the ultra-wealthy get more money, well, perhaps they could build more factories or somehow hire more people. And often that is the case. However, what conservatives fail to mention typically is most of that extra money is saved. It goes into investments or into treasury bonds or some other kind of investment, which might not benefit the society as a whole, and particularly the more poor amongst us. So you do the opposite. You say, phooey on trickle-down theory. We're reversing it. We're going for trickle-up. Well, how do you even do that? Well, the way you do that is you put more money in the hands of the poorest people. Conservatives would say that's like an anathema, like a curse, like the last thing you would think of. I guess I'm a communist, but I'm not. I'm a liberal thinking capitalist. And, as I said, the headwinds are strong. The opposition fierce. But this can be done. Let's push ahead, shall we? We're putting money in the hands of poor people. How? Well, certainly we could increase government benefits for those who need them, such as food stamps and Section 8 housing, unemployment insurance, and other benefits that help poor people. Why do the rich people hate that idea so much? Well, if you increase benefits for the poorest amongst us, those with disabilities, those who are retired, and so on and so on. Speaking of retirement, it is my 65th birthday, like right now. Happy birthday to me. But moving along, people who don't work, people who can't work. As I said, retired people, people with disabilities. If you give them more money, as far as in Social Security, let's say, and government benefits, well, then it would make sense you would have to increase minimum wage. You can't have people who don't even work making more money than people who do. Oh, yeah, that makes total sense. People who work should make more people who work, in theory, especially if they work full time. Okay, full time workers should make more money than people who don't work, in theory. So when the government benefits go up for people who do not work, that means in theory the minimum wage should go up and wages should go up for people who do work. Well, that's the last thing rich people want, is to pay us more money. Seriously. That's a headwind. Bam, we just hit it. Oh, we could barely move now. But the opposition is so strong. But now we know we're fighting. A minimum wage that hasn't increased in how many years? And what's the federal minimum wage? $7.25 or something insulting like that per hour? Quote, you try living on that. It must be a nightmare. And I'm sure a lot of people, well, probably live close to that. Either through low wages or not being able to obtain full-time work and being forced into part-time work because of their boss wants it that way or because the work is simply unavailable. Then people are hardly scraping by or they're sinking in credit card debt. Let's move along. These headwinds are really fierce here, but we're getting to the idea that we need to provide more money for, social services and unemployment insurance and food stamps and other government programs that aid the poor. Of course, let's restore USAID and kind of do this thing internationally a little bit. Well, how are we going to pay for all this? Well, obviously, we increase taxes on the wealthy. Well, how much are we going to have to increase taxes on the wealthy? Well, maybe not that much. And especially if you take away corporate welfare, benefits for large corporations, such as oil companies. They often get amazing tax breaks and other government benefits, saving them millions of dollars, while the rest of us suffer with marginal government assistance. Let's get rid of corporate welfare. Also, let's get rid of the cap on Social Security tax. You're only taxed up to a certain amount. So if you make, let's say, $10 million a year, you might be taxed on perhaps 300,000 of that or less for Social Security. Well, the government figures you won't need to be taxed on any more than that. Well, yes, to serve yourself, that's probably true. But when you look at so many people being having disabilities, unable to find full-time work, retired people, poor people, and you think of how incredibly wealthy some people are, the few ultra wealthy, and how much more money we could raise if we just tax them at a higher rate with Social Security. Sure, we could do it. just, perhaps lift the ceiling to $1 million if someone makes a year. You have that as their taxable Social Security income instead of 300,000 or something like that. Maybe even more than $1 million. Do it by a percentage, 1% of their total net worth per year, or something like that. And for people like Elon Musk and others, they might pay a lot of money. But it's worth it for the good of all to really benefit society and to help, reverse wealth concentration. So we'll have a fair distribution of wealth. So we raise taxes a little bit. We get rid of corporate welfare. Hey, how does that money trickle up anyway? Oh, okay, I'll get to it. It's pretty obvious in case you haven't figured it out. You throw money into the poorest people. Do you think they're going to run to the bank, put it in savings, and let it sit there for 10 years? No. Perhaps someone who's ultra wealthy might do something like that. But you know the deal. The poorest amongst us, well, that money's instantly spent. It's spent within hours, within days, paying bills, buying services that they need, buying other things, but whatever it is, the money is spent, and it's spent quickly. And so that money instantly starts benefiting what? Some small store owner, perhaps, or perhaps even a wealthy corporation. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about here. All this money that you give to the poor people, you might say, oh, it's so awful to give them more money, and especially to give them a lot more money. But the more money you give them, the more money they're going to spend. And that money's going to come right up to the ultra wealthy. And they'll make more money, have more money, and have more money to pay the taxes. Sure. And so it kind of feeds on itself. The rich get richer, they have more money to pay taxes, that provides more money.
Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, CaseyWaters2 @CaseyWaters.com.